All right, well, welcome class. We are going through the lab 6.1 and we are looking at the properties of covalent materials. We've already seen the properties of ionic compounds and we saw that they share properties. Ionic compounds really are very much similar to one another. We saw that they were crystalline, that they did not conduct electricity as a solid, but then when they dissolved in water, which they were soluble in water, they did conduct electricity, and they all had a high melting point. That is for ionic compounds. Now we're looking at covalent compounds, and we expect to see a little more variation in our properties. Let's see if we see that. Let's start with the melting point. Okay, and so I have my samples already set up here in my aluminum boats. And so we're going to set those on our hot plate over here. And we're going to set them in the order that they appear on our worksheet to kind of keep them straight. And so here our sucrose is going to go here on the left side. We're just going to keep them right in order. Our citric acid, our stearic acid, and our wax. We've got our hot plate set to a setting of 2, or let's set it down to 1. And so that's going to be, and we can already see our citric acid is already melting. And that, yeah, we don't have to wait long at all. I thought we were going to have to wait. Here's our stearic acid. So we're starting at the bottom, doesn't melt easily. Our citric acid has already melted. Our stearic acid has melted, and our wax has melted, predictably. Our sucrose is holding strong. We might come back to that and see if it melts later on. Okay, so we certainly have at least 3 of the 4 that have melted easily. All right, let's look at now, is it crystalline? And for this, I've got some pictures of our microscope. And so let's look at those now. Sucrose, and again, what we're looking for crystalline structure is, does it have those sharp edges or is it bulbous? Does it look like it has a nice crystalline structure? And we look at the sucrose and, I'll let you make your own judgment call. Do you see sharp edges? Does it look crystalline to you? Here's our citric acid. Now we're starting to get certainly a little more of a rounded edges, a little more bulbous in structure. Let's move on to our stearic acid. Does it look crystalline to you? And then finally our wax. Very much the least crystalline of all. Okay, so we've looked at, is it crystalline? We've looked at what's the melting point? Is the melting point high, or does it take a long time to melt, or is the melting point low? And so now we're going to move on to, is the solid conductive? We've got our conductivity tester here. As always, we want to make sure that our conductivity tester works. And so indeed, you can see the light coming on when I push it against my scupula. And so we know our conductivity tester works. Let's test them all in order. Let's start with sucrose here. Okay? So I put my conductivity tester in there. Nothing. So our sucrose does not conduct electricity as a solid. How about now our citric acid? Same thing. And this is the same that we saw with the ionic compounds. We didn't get any, this is stearic acid, we didn't get any of those, we didn't get any reading of conductivity with our ionic solids. Our stearic acid does not conduct electricity. And then finally, our wax. Let's set that in there. No conductivity for our wax either. All right, so the solid is not conductive. How about is it soluble? Is it soluble in water? Here are our test tubes. I'm going to bring them in one at a time as we test our solubility. Let's start with our sucrose. So here's our sucrose. Put a small amount in. Cap it, and we shake. Looks like, let's see if we can get this into focus. It looks like we still have some flakes floating around in there, but we are dissolving. Certainly far less than what we started with. In fact, actually all of this has dissolved. And you might recognize sucrose as sugar. And so you probably already knew that this sucrose was going to dissolve in our water. Okay, let's set that one aside for now. We'll test the conductivity shortly of that. Here is our citric acid. Let's test our citric acid. Here's our citric acid. Well, let's see. What I see are we've got some stubborn particles still in there. It's taken a while, but it looks like little by little it is dissolving. In fact, I'm not sure I see any more. Our citric acid took a little longer than our sucrose, but eventually did dissolve. Okay. How about our stearic acid? Now we're moving on to our stearic acid. I'll tell you what, I don't see, it looks like almost the exact amount that I started with in there. So it looks like my stearic acid, I'm not seeing any of that stearic acid dissolving into our water, or at least not very much, if any. Okay, so it looks like our stearic acid is not soluble. Okay, finally, let's end with our wax. You might be able to predict what happens when you put wax in water, but let's look at it anyway. Our wax is in our water. Shake it up. Certainly looks as if our wax is not dissolving, and predictably so. We wouldn't have expected wax to dissolve in water. Wax is very nonpolar, water is very polar, and like dissolves like. And so so we have two of our substances that were soluble in water and two that were not. Okay, let's test our conductivity when dissolved. We said that none of them were conductive as solid, and so let's test now when dissolved in water. And actually, let's move our paper. This might get a little wet. I've got a small amount in each of these. And so we're going to pour our sample that we just dissolved, if it did dissolve, into each, and then let's label these. those over. So first we've got our sucrose. Next, our citric acid. Our stearic acid. These are just our samples that we already dissolved. And finally, our wax. Okay. Now it's time to test the conductivity when dissolved. Remember, ionic compounds conducted electricity when dissolved. Let's see if that is true of covalent as well. Okay. Okay, I don't see a light. Let's see what a light would look like. Okay, you can see if it did conduct, that's what it would look like. We don't have a light there. Okay, let's clean that off. Let's try citric acid. Citric acid looks like it is giving us a little bit of a glow. There you go. Okay, let's try stearic. I wonder. This is what it would look like if it conducted electricity. And then finally our wax. All right. So that is conducting electricity when dissolved in water. Are we finished? Let's see. We've gone through. Is it crystalline? Solid conductive, soluble in water. Crystalline, solid conductive, soluble in water. Solution is solid. Does it melt easily? Let's check back with our sucrose. How's the melting point of our sucrose? It looks like our sucrose has still not melted. So our sucrose has a high melting point, whereas it looks like the other four have low melting points. Okay, you've got some questions to answer based on considering the properties and the nomenclature for covalent compounds, and then another solubility curve to reason through. Good luck, have fun, and thanks for watching.